Dion, it's always good to have you with us. Dion's part of the family, and he's been with us for a long journey. He was very integral in the Exposed campaign, and he served as chairman of that campaign, also bringing awareness and getting signatures from men and women around the world to stand for ethics. He currently is a senior lecturer at Stellenbosch University on ethics and public theology. This means that these are the issues, and the relevance of the subject is so important to Dion. And so, Dion, good to have you and welcome. Dion is going to lead our panel on business leaders. The first person we're going to ask to come forward is Edward Beaker, who is the founder and the CEO of Red Security.
And we have Mbulelo Pikwani, Executive Director, HR of the Medical Research Council.
And Andrew Bradley, CEO of Old Mutual Wealth.
Anita Lewis, founder of Brights Hardware and Electrical.
Russ Myberg, founder and CEO of Hindsight Financial and Commercial Solutions.
And Graham Reynolds, CEO of Dozer Pty Ltd, based in Johannesburg.
Great. We'd like to give our panel a great welcome, and over to you, Dion.
Right. Good morning, everybody. How's your energy? Are you ready for a little bit of engagement in this panel? Come on, you can get more excited than that. We have a veritable who's who of business sitting before us here today. Last night, as I was looking through the list of panelists again, I thought, my goodness, if ever I wanted to start something up in the country, this would be not just the dream team, they'd be the dream team of dream teams. Now, just to explain to you a little bit how this panel is going to work, we want it to be as interactive as possible. At the end of the day, transformation happens, as we've been so wonderfully reminded by Patrick, when we ourselves are encountered by God in the place where we live and work. And so what we're going to do is we're going to ask each of the panelists to give us just a 2-3 minute introduction of their area of work and how ethics has been an issue or a concern or a challenge for them within their sphere of operation. So we've prepared them to do that just for 2 or 3 minutes. And what I'd like to ask you to do is, please, while they're talking, if you have a question for one of the panelists or a question for all of the panelists, although I would encourage you, keep those to a minimum. We have limited time. Won't you please write it down? Then once the panelists have each done their introduction, and I'll introduce each of them separately, then we're going to open the floor to questions. And you can ask anything you like. I would encourage you, keep it on the subject of ethics. If you want to know where to buy a good car, there may be someone in the room who can help you with that. But let's engage them in their area of expertise and see what we can learn about being unashamedly ethical in the world of work. So, colleagues, it's my privilege to introduce to you the first of our panelists today. And I see you've got the mic in front of you there, Edward. Just to say, all of the speakers, their full bios can be found from page 6 in your notes. And I would encourage you just to have a look there. I'll give you just a little synopsis. First to speak is Edward Beaker, who is the CEO of Red Security. Edward is one of those folks that we need more of. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, and his interests are in security and the ICT sectors. With more than 20 years of experience in the industry of security, he's received training in the Netherlands in management, and he consults extensively to the industry in South Africa. Edward also happens to be one of the members of the board or the executive of Unashamedly Ethical. So let's give him a hand as he speaks.
Good morning, Huey family dignitaries. It's quite a pleasure and honor to be here this morning. I'm quite humbled. I think just briefly on the industry that I work in, our industry's expanded quite rapidly over the years. It's grown into a multi-billion rand industry with excess of 9,000 private security companies, which gives us probably a database of excess of 2 million registered security officers. And I think the authorities haven't anticipated the rapid growth in the industry, so regulation of the industry is quite challenging. And if we just reflect on the newspapers, there's been a lot of articles where security personnel has been involved in transgressions. And in 2001, the Security Amendment Bill was passed, which puts the onus on private individuals and private sector like yourselves to ensure that companies like us are compliant, knowing that the regulatory authority it's extremely challenging to manage the industry. And, for ourselves, what we've implemented over the years is really holding our management accountable with strong codes of disciplinary practice, enforcing, our commitment to our clients to ensure service delivery. And, obviously with that, it's taken our toll on losing key personnel that does not embrace ethical values. And I think today, when we confront clients, it's we need to be the honest people, and we really need to employ individuals that's got ethics and values and integrity enshrined in their moral fiber. Stephen Covey put it so wonderful in his book, The 7 Habits to Most Effective People. He said the value that we place on ourselves is the ability to keep a commitment to ourselves. And we are actually the disciples and followers of our own value system. And really, when we've re-looked at our recruitment and policies, really is really stressing to our staff database or our recruits that you need to be accountable for your actions. Working. We do experience challenges, but we I think just need to deal with that and be accountable for those actions as we carry on in the industry. I think the common phenomena that we find in our industry is obviously collusion, price fixing, as well as underpricing. The advantage is what most of you don't know, on the regulatory authorities' website, there's clear guidance in terms of the regulation, the pricing structure, so you can easily see when this company is getting into price wars, underpricing, because either government will be shortchanged or your personnel will be shortchanged. Thank you.
Edward, thank you. Certainly, yours is an industry which we rely on a great deal, and we are grateful for people like yourself taking such a strong stand. Next on our panel, we have Andrew Bradley. Andrew, thank you for being here today. Andrew is the Chief Executive of Old Mutual Wealth, so a good guy to know, and the Chairman of Axis, a business that he founded, which Old Mutual has recently acquired. He also served as the Chairman of the boards of the South African Savings Institute, the Financial Planning Institute, and the Cape Town chapter of the Young Presidents Organization, known as the YPO, as well as a board member of the Association of Collective Investments and the Financial Planning Standards Board. And Andrew, I was so pleased to see that you were also on the board of the South African Rugby Players Association. Many of you will know Andrew not only from his work in industry, but also from the various publications that he produces. He's a regular columnist and certainly someone who is a real expert. So Andrew, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks very much, Dion. I'm not so sure about expert, but certainly I think in my field, the one thing that one learns very quickly is that there's so much to learn and so much to get to know. The most important thing is knowing what you don't know, and that's most things. I think very simply, the career that I've been involved in, the profession, is looking after other people's money. And I've done that now for the last 25 years. And I think when I started out in that profession, the very first thing one wants to do is be as successful as you possibly can. And so I realized that there were two ways in which to do that. The one is to actually get more clients with more money, or on the money that you get from them, you make more money for yourself. And so I very quickly realized, for me personally, and I don't want to pass judgment onto other people, and I think the Archbishop said it exceptionally well this morning, is what is right. Now, all I can say is what was right for me. And to give you a simple example, in our industry, if you give me, let's take 100 Rand, I could structure that investment for you in such a way that I could earn 0.5% of a commission, I could earn 2%, 5%, up to 35%. Okay? So of your 100 Rand, I would be able to earn 35 Rand. Now, I will gamble for a second, which I don't do, and say, I bet you I could convince you to do the investment where I'd earn 35%. Now, in my opinion, that's totally inappropriate, that there is a conflict of interest between someone who's entrusting you with their money and someone who has a fiduciary responsibility to take care of that money. So what I simply said is that doesn't work for me, and so I started a business where I said I will agree with my clients what I earn irrespective of what happens to their money, irrespective of where it is invested. And I will align my earnings with their investments over the duration and not get paid up front and not care about theirs. Now, as I said, that's the way the industry generally works. I'm not going to pass judgment on others. They have their reasons for doing that. But that, for me, was unacceptable. And so, I was delighted to be able to build up a reasonable business based on those principles, where the question every single morning for my colleagues and I was, if this was our money, what would we be doing with it? And that is the test from every single aspect. We had very many interesting debates. That doesn't mean we don't charge. We have to charge, because if we don't charge, we won't be there to provide the job for our clients. But as long as they understand it and it's fair for all concerned, that was the test for us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. Friends, just to remind you, please note your questions. I got a little note from Diane that said we're actually going to have some help with it. So if you have a question, would you write it down on the pads that you have there, and we'll have ushers collect them, and that will streamline the process of asking questions. So just write it out in your best English, Xhosa, Tswana, Sotho, Zulu, Spanish, anything, but English is preferable. The next panelist that we have is a good friend for some years, Nita Louis. And Nita, it's wonderful to have you here. I think many of us will know Nita as the co-founder of Bright's Hardware. As you're traveling along the roads of Cape Town, you will often see signage and, of course, their shops. And Nita, her full profile is in the handout that I gave you. When I contacted her to say, Nita, how can I introduce you? She started by saying that she has 4 children, 1 son and 3 daughters, 10 grandchildren. So she's developing that legacy. She's been a widow for 15 years, and she says, I devote my time to supporting the HR and training needs of all of the Bright staff. Nita is an example of ethical business, and she does it with a very soft touch. So let's welcome Nita Louis.
Good morning. Thank you very much for those words. And I want to say good morning, family, if I can call you family. And I'm sure I can. Patrick, you really spoke to my heart today. And I just want to tell you a story. Bright started in 1971. It was a broken-down business that my husband and I bought. It cost us 6,000 Rand. It was a lot of money in those days. It's the only money we had. And it was a general dealer, and we had to transform it into what our dream was, to one day have a hardware and electrical business. I remember one day a customer saying to me, this is the only shop where I can buy a banana and a banana plug. So, because we literally sold everything. But as the years went by, we transformed totally. But in those days, I remember it was about survival. And we would do just about anything for survival. Whether it was fair or unfair, we believed that all's fair in life and war and business. So if there was an extra buck to be made, well, we grabbed it. But through the years went by, and I don't know where survival turned to selfishness. I don't remember. Somewhere along the line, it changed, that it became self-centeredness and selfishness. But then God, in His mercy, changed that all. And I say for the first 30 years, it was all about profit and wealth. But then God had another plan, you see. So He had to allow me to be totally broken before He could reconstruct me. And my husband had already passed away. And there started a complete change where God actually changed my heart. And it's true what Patrick says, until you change, there won't be any change. It actually starts with you. And that's what happened. I had to change, and it took a while because I was so independent and so full of myself. I just loved me, you know. And He had to change all that. And it was a process. And, you know, I had to ask my staff in this last couple of days, what do they see that is so ethical about brides? And they came up with a couple of things. They said, well, one thing they learned is that when a supplier supplies you incorrectly and you have a surplus, you have to report it immediately, and the supplier gets phoned to come and collect his goods. And I think that spoke to them. And another thing was that they were surprised that we always paid our suppliers on time. And, agreed time. Because there have been times where it's been difficult. And then the third one was that we took a stand for closing on a Sunday, which was one of the hardest things that I had to do. We were the first business in 1976 to open on a Sunday. There was no other hardware. Those who are here that remember that you couldn't even sell sugar, it was on a Sunday. It had to be only cafe lines. And in those days, because we had other goods, it didn't pay us to open. But in 1976, the law changed. So, yippee, you know. Now we can open on a Sunday, and I grabbed that opportunity. And we prided ourselves for being the business that was open, those long hours, and open on a Sunday. And then God showed me after the year 2001, actually. He showed me those. After many other things I had to change, He told me that I had to change that one. I had to close. And it took me 5 years to do it because I had to get agreement from the board, which was my family in those days. And eventually in 2006 we closed. And when we closed, well, all hell broke loose after that, because then came the recession, stepped in, and with the temptation to can't I just open again on a Sunday? And everything would just be so much better. And I had to take a stand there that we had to persevere. And after that, for the last, since 2006 to today, we successfully opened 4 franchises. We have not retrenched one person, although our turnover did take a knock. But there, I believe that God is always faithful when we are obedient. And, that's what my staff said, you know. So I think I've made some impression there, and that's what it's all about. It's all about us teaching our children and teaching those who are looking to us for leadership. What do we stand for, and how do we set that example and influence? Thank you.
Nita, thank you. Such an honest reflection, and I hope you're hearing that coming through today, that we really are talking about what it means to be Christians in business. We've got to find ways to make this work. I remember when Graham and I wrote that little book, Transform Your Work Life, I interviewed a number of people and spoke to them about what does it mean to be a Christian in business. And I remember one person who shall remain unnamed said to me, these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is cash flow. So, yeah. Friends, it's my great privilege to introduce one of the first people I got to meet when I came to join Graham in Cape Town in 2008, and that's Mbulelo Bikwana. Mbulelo is another very, very successful Christian in the world of work, and he's incredibly, incredibly humble about it. And I really would encourage you just to go and read through his profile in the book that you received today, the little booklet. He perhaps is one of the most significant Christians that I know, operating at such a wide level between both business and government sectors. And when I asked him how he was to be introduced, he said, just tell them that I'm married to Nombulelo with 3 daughters, Nina, Lihlomelo, and Leli Sibini, born and grew up in Guguletu, founder and chairman of Isiseko Family Institute, and a man who fears sin and desires the heart of God. Could there be any greater desire than that? So thank you, Mbulelo.
Thank you, Dion. When we went for a marriage session with my wife before we got married, she was asked a question: why is she getting married to me? And without thinking too much, she said, no, it's because he's an honest man. And I knew from that day that I can never be dishonest. From that day, I knew that if I want to keep my wife and I want to remain in this marriage, then dishonesty is not a choice. I joined Rentokil in 1999 as an HR director in a very strange way, where I normally say to people, those people who don't believe that God can take us from being shepherds and makes us kings, he must ask me, because I was a director of a company having never been a manager before. I was never a manager before, was a commissioner at the CCMA, and here is the managing director of this company who appeared before me after their case, asked me to come and become a director at their company. And I refused then because I thought that he was trying to bribe me with a position in his company. But eventually I agreed after 2 years. Now, those who know Rentokil is a services company. And the company puts its trust on the employees that are in the road with the vans, the Rentokil vans. Now you have more than 1,000 employees. What do you do? And the first thing I did when I got to Rentokil, I went around the country to teach about honesty, all the employees. And I said to them, this is the only mercy I have, is to teach you about honesty and tell you that if you are dishonest, you must know that you have lost your job. I will have no mercy with someone who is dishonest. But if you do anything else, we can talk. But if you are dishonest in any way, that's the end of your job. And that culture was known at Rentokil when I was HR director, that Mbulelo will forgive you for anything else except dishonesty. I now chair the University Council, which is a 1.6 billion revenue institution. When I was asked to come and chair the council, I asked the people who came to ask me, but why? What are you looking for in a chairman of council? Because I don't think I'm qualified to become chair of council. They said, no, we're looking for someone who was born in Cape Town, someone who has some legal background, someone who's honest. And I said, well, I'm not too sure about the honesty, but these two, I do have a legal background and I was born in Cape Town. They said, no, leave it with us, but we want you to come and chair council, which I eventually did. Within my first month as chair of council, I received a call from a friend who said to me, we were together at university, who said to me, I've just heard that you have been appointed chair of council of CPUT. And I said, yes. He said, now it's our time. These coloureds have been eating at CPUT. Now it's our time. That catering tender must come to me. Now I kept quiet for some time, and I listened and listened. And I said to him, look, I'll come back to you. So I have my wife as the best advisor. I mean, whatever decision you know I've taken, you must know my wife has an input in it. That's how much I trust her. So I phoned her and I said, what do you think about this? She was so angry because she knows the person. And I said, look, I said to him, I'm going to give him the university number for him to call the university and find out who is dealing with tenders. My wife said to me, you don't even have to do that. He must go to the phone book and find the university numbers himself. I didn't even waste time. I took my phone immediately and I said to him, listen, I have nothing to do with this. If you want to phone the university, you can go to the phone book and get the number of the university and phone and ask about tenders. I am chairman of council. I don't want to know what happens with tenders because it's not my area. And don't ask me about tenders again. And this was a close friend. We played football together and all sorts of things. And I think that was probably the last time we spoke until we met at an airport in Johannesburg. We just greeted each other. I don't know what he thinks. Now, as I close, a debate between a 4-year-old girl and her father about toffee. She wanted to buy toffee, but this toffee was quite big. So the father said, but darling, this toffee is too big for you. And she said, Daddy, but no, it is not. I said, no, but it's big for you. He said, no, it's not. Daddy, you forget one thing. I'm big inside. We have to be big inside if we have to be business leaders. Thank you.
Indeed, we need more Christian business leaders who are willing to stand for what is right, even at the cost of friendships. Friends, it's my privilege to introduce the next panelist to you, Russ Myberg. Russ also is a good friend of some years, him and Liz, his wonderful wife. Russ is also one of the most unassuming people that you'll ever come to meet. He has very extensive experience in two areas, both in state-owned enterprise, having advised for many years Eskom and Russ, how we wish they'd taken your advice, as well as in the private sector, particularly in the mining industry. He spent his early career on Eskom's power stations before joining Eskom Mining. He's led various turnaround ventures, performance improvement initiatives, and major change management programs during his career. The last of these is the unbundling of Kumba Resources and the separate listing of Kumba Iron Ore on the JSE Top 40 companies, which he held as the chief executive until 2008. And he now runs a consulting company called Hindsight Financial Commercial Solutions. So, Russ, thank you for your input today.
Thank you, Dion, and good morning to everybody. I choose not to speak anything about Eskom at the moment. I had the privilege of working in both the mining industry and also in Eskom, and advised also some of the some government departments on some policy issues, and had some experience of late, and I've seen through my career how I think the moral fabric of our country and our business changed for the worst, unfortunately. But the mining industry, as you know, has its challenges, specifically on the ethics field. And I'm not only talking about the direct ethic issues that we talk about, bribery, corruption, etc., but also much more bigger issues of ethics. And this is about sustainability, about what do we do with the resources that we are entrusted to. The mining industry impacts a lot on natural resources and also the interests of generations to come, not only these generations. And these are very critically important things to consider in how you actually create a company. I'm not going to talk anything about procurement. My dear friend who's a supplier to the industry here will tell you about some of the things that goes on in the procurement area. But the one thing that I've learned, and you've heard it echoed by the panelists here today, you cannot legislate for ethics. You cannot legislate for something that needs to come from a value system. And we've seen this, and you can look at all the research done. You can just think back about one of the biggest scandals in industry, the Enron scandal, 2001, where one of the biggest fall downs of governance, corporate governance. And the single thing that you can boil down to what was the root cause of that massive scandal and loss of financial value for so many people, the whole company was wiped out. It's not that they didn't have the governance systems in place. They had it all. It's not that they didn't have the boards, the financial processes and systems. It's not that they didn't have auditors to check them. It was one thing and one thing only, and that was the value system entrenched in the leaders that they instilled on the business itself. And in my mind, doesn't matter where you go, if you want to address this issue of values and ethics, it has to start with leadership. Look at our own King Code on Corporate Governance. They recognize that there are three critically important legs, philosophical legs, that anything to do with governance need to stand on. And that starts with leadership. It starts with the leadership who has the ethics, the honesty and the openness entrenched in their own value system foremost. Then they go on and talk about all the other things. And in my experience, we as leaders have a critical role to play of what we stand for, what tone we set from the top, and what we tolerate and do. And we will have to account for that in the future as well.
Ross, thank you so much for that strong challenge. Now it's my privilege to introduce a good friend, Graham Reynolds. Graham is a very successful, very hard-driven Christian businessman because of his success, but he's also one of the nicest guys you'll ever get to know. One of my fondest memories of Graham is at Disneyland in Florida when we were together. By the way, Graham was also there. I can't remember what the ride was that we were on, but these guys screamed like girls. So Graham Reynolds owns and operates a private business which focuses on trading large mining equipment and related products into the mining sector. As Russ mentioned, he's based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and deals in regions across Africa and abroad. His business is not listed. It's a 100% privately owned and operated company. But the most important thing Graham says about his business is that it is governed and operated on kingdom principles. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you, Dion. We used to call him doctor. We call him prof now. You know. But thank you for those words. You know, we've got a private company, and I sit here and I represent my family and my staff, because without that team, nothing happens. There's two choices that we've had to make in the last 8 to 10 years is one is to transform the company into a Christian kingdom-based serving Christ company with biblical rules setting the standard. And the next biggest choice was the UE choice in a very, very messy environment, mining supply and mining equipment. We buy up those big yellow Caterpillars, those 200-300-ton machines around the world. We bring them in, we break them to pieces, and we carefully procure them either as a complete unit for a second and a third life, or for component or parts purposes. It's a type of business that you can hide a lot of money into a deal without any effort whatsoever. You can hide $1 million into a truck deal with ease. The mining industry, to an extent, the supply too has had an issue, and the issue is the mutually agreed sort of trade practice. The heads of the mining groups cannot control what's happening down at the bottom. And what happens is it's unwritten sort of a sway of what is correct and what is not correct in terms of the way you do business. Nothing seems to be written down. If everybody's doing it well, then it's fine, which creates this sort of a poison in the way it's done. Auctions have been a big way that these big groups have sort of said, well, we can get rid of assets. The auctions, to a certain extent, over the past few years have been highly, highly controlled by the sway of what the people are calling. Very powerful money, very powerful people involved, a lot of intimidation and that sort of thing. The advent of online auctions has been great because it's shut them down, which has been very good. To let the underdog come through now, I think it's going to give them a chance. But these guys seem to find their way in. The choice to accept and to do it the unashamedly ethical way has been interesting because you can run your business, but you don't know what's happening down in the coalface. There are things that people do in your business that you don't have a control over. And what's happened is in businesses like ours, you have to instill it. It has to be a daily sort of commitment. You have to show that you're committed to this drive and this campaign. You have to speak it. The people have to see you do it. They have to see the sway, and you have to. That's your way I've found of getting it down to the bottom levels. It's quite simple. I think that if a head goes rotten a fish goes rotten from the head back, and if we as business leaders don't make this choice and stand on it, we're never going to get it right. And I think the country will never get it right. And I think it starts with us, and I think we can change the tide and make things happen. That's me.
Wonderful, Graham. Really a very, very powerful challenge, and I think it is critical for us to remember that both in business and in broader society. This is an election year. We have important choices to make as Christians. But that choice begins, thanks Diane, with each one of us right where we are. Now, we've received a whole flurry of questions, and I've tried to group them. So if you don't recognize your question exactly, I hope I represent it well. We wouldn't have enough time to answer all of them. I think we've got enough here, Graham. It'll keep us going. We want to start first with a question, Andrew and Mbulelo, for the two of you. And maybe we could start with you, Andrew, and then over to Mbulelo. You're both in corporate business, which has a particular culture and way of operating. How tough is it to be Christian and to live out these values in corporate life? So, Andrew, maybe we can start with you.
I'm fairly new to corporate life, if one defines it that, having run my own business for a number of years, my business being acquired a few years ago. and coming in. I think corporates have a way of operating. They have practice standards, etc. And when an outsider comes in, I think one has challenges. I used to look about 25 until a year or so ago, and I've aged a bit. So I think, you've got to, in my opinion, so take a step back, it hasn't been easy, and I'm not sure if it hasn't been easy just because I'm an outsider or because I stand for very specific principles. I've been accused of being self-righteous, pious, a crusader, whatever it might be. And again, so I'm not sure. I don't try and judge why people say that. To me, the important issue always comes down to, let's have a conversation about what is the right thing here. And it isn't easy. It isn't easy. But for me, I'm very comfortable in every conversation that I have. And in many instances, sadly, what I believe is right and what I believe should be done doesn't happen within an organization. And sometimes it takes a lot longer to get to where you want to be. When it was my own business, it was exceptionally easy. I think everyone that was employed there understood the principles, they understood what we were standing for, they understood what we were trying to achieve, and that's the benchmark. But an organization where, within my area of the business now, there's only about 700 people in an organization of, I don't even know how many there are, 30,000 or so. So that business, which was effectively what I'm now responsible for, is pulled together 7 businesses together into one. And that's a year or so in the making. We're still trying to instill those principles. So it is difficult. Some days I do go home a little bit exasperated. But what makes me feel very comfortable is that's what I stand for. When I was asked to do this job, I made it very clear that those were the principles that I was going to stand for, and that I wasn't prepared to compromise. And I didn't say I was right. I said that's what I stand for, so please make sure you understand what you get when you get me. That's it. So it's, at a senior level within the organization, at a board level, and that they understand that. But on the ground, where the things have to happen, it is very, very difficult. I don't know.
I don't think it is more difficult than being a Christian. I don't think so. Unless you are a nominal Christian. But if you are a Christian, whether you are in the corporate or at home or anywhere, the standards are the same. And strictly speaking, one of the things we have to do is just to make known who we are when we participate in boards and all those sorts of things, so that people can know what they can talk to you about and what they can't talk to you about. Christians have a way of hiding, and they don't want to be known that they are Christians. They sit on boards, they don't want to be known that they are Christians. And I told my staff at Rentokil, all of them, that I am a Christian. I'm not suggesting that you must be a Christian, but I'm telling you who I am, so that people know what they can talk to you about, what is it that they can't talk to you about. So I don't think it is a difficult thing. If you live the life you live, which is a non-negotiable life and standards that are set by God.
Wonderful. Thank you. Deeply challenging there. Thank you, gentlemen. We have a question now which Edward and Nita is directed to the two of you. The question is, what are some of the biblical principles that have informed your stance on ethics in your respective businesses? And Edward, maybe we can start with you. And Nita, go over to you.
Yeah, I think the first biblical principle we find in Proverbs 22:1. It says that a good name is more valuable than great riches. And I also find it in Psalm 127. If God doesn't build a house, we labor in vain. So I believe that, our door is not just open for believers, for all, any member of any faith, employees coming to seek employment, but it's important that during the process of recruitment that we make our staff understand that we're looking for individuals with a vision, with a purpose that's purpose-driven, and think through that they will bring value not only to ourselves, but through to our clients and start transforming communities as well.
I think what we have installed in our staff is, I'm actually in charge of training, so a lot of the life skills that is taught in the business has been, started by myself. And one of the main things that we teach is do unto others as you would like to be done unto you. And once you do that, can you just imagine if that had to happen in the real sense of it, what a different world we would have. And I think every staff member that comes to us, doesn't matter at which level he comes in, he gets taught the same thing. And I personally believe that training is a big thing for the upliftment of people. If you don't train them, how would they, even the thought that they are possibly the future of the company, if they're not at a level where they can take ownership, that will never happen, or you will have very poor leadership after that. So for us, it's important to teach biblical principles, which we do. In every meeting, we always emphasize that there has to be prayer before the meeting. So it's very clear to everyone that we deal with that we stand for Christian principles, and it starts with prayer. And then, like I heard earlier on, there's no use praying and you don't do things. So it starts with prayer, and it must spill over to the way in which we live. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nita. Now, here is a very difficult question, and it's for the two gentlemen on the end there. I don't know if in your lives you've ever received what's known as a left-handed compliment. Do you know what a left-handed compliment is? It's when someone gives you a compliment, but really they're asking a tough question. So here's the left-handed question. The compliment is this: it's easy to be ethical when you are successful. So well done, successful gentlemen. The question is this for Graham and for Russ, and we'll begin with you, Russ, if you don't mind. Is it possible to grow and thrive at the beginning of a business in that survival stage based on ethical principles? Or do you need to be unethical to get ahead? There you go.
I think the test mostly comes, and I think the Lord brings us into times when He tests our faith. As far as growth in business is concerned, in starting my own business, we were extremely blessed that we had an anchor client, and we never got into that position where we were stressed. However, the most important thing is that you got to stay your way and stay your faith. In times when we were tested, even as a chief executive of a very highly successful company, you get to points where you are really in a low, when the markets and everything else turn against you, where it feels that the whole world is against you. And I can guarantee you, in times when we were advising Eskom, we were exactly in the same position. And from my own experience, there's only one thing that got us out of there. And this is when we humbled ourselves and said, we don't know. We have no way out. We have no answers to this. And we turned to prayer. I can tell you a lot of stories about how prayer in a corporate environment changes things around that you can never expect. I can tell you, and I can bring to you testimonies of even in organizations that we sometimes point a lot of fingers to, like Eskom, that there are people in there who understand and know this, and God has put them up there. And through prayer, a lot of things change very quickly. And to me, that's my only answer.
Yeah, Dion. If I said to you, I dug a hole of about 60 million at one stage. I probably owed SARS in excess of 20 million on top of that. So if you want to know, start at the bottom, we went past the bottom. Okay? There's a lot of temptation when you get there, especially with things like SARS, to take the shortcut. The best advice that was ever given to me on that is, if you have a problem with somebody like SARS, and you owe them money, you don't have money, get in your car, make an appointment, go and see them, and get ready to pay. And I promise you, by doing it the right way, you will find grace. Absolutely. We've come to it, we've settled, and it's been a long walk, but you do it the right way, you'll find the answer. You know, I think the principle of doing it ethically correct, if you've got Christ involved, and you stick to what his word says, and he says you seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and it tells you what's going to be added unto you. You know, we take the word for sometimes you read it, you think it's a storybook. When God says he will do that, he will do that. When he says do it the right way, or take a left turn or a right turn in accordance with his word, you will find the answer. So I think as we made a choice first for Christ in our group of companies, and now the unashamedly ethical stand, things have changed, and they have changed for the better. Sometimes you can't see it, you will see it in the end. Make the choice.
I think we can sense a couple of themes coming through here, and I think if you are discerning the move of the Spirit, you'll have seen it coming through all the way from what Patrick said this morning. God first. And having discovered that is a fundamental and core principle, God is the designer of everything, including the economy and every aspect of life. So God first, and then, of course, from our side, courage to do what is right and to consistently do what is right, to do it day by day. So, lady and gentlemen, thank you for your wonderful input today. We're going to give them a hand in just a minute. Andrew, just to say, we got about 5 questions from people. I don't expect you to answer them now, saying, should I invest in this? What does the next 5 years look like? Can I just ask that the owners of these questions, if you get to see Andrew Bradley, won't you come and share that advice with me? Let's give our panelists a big hand and thank them.